since 2016. Prior to that, she worked in the ECE sector in St. John's, Newfoundland for 28 years. She is active in several provincial and national associations related to early childhood education, including Vice President of the Canadian Association of Research in Early Childhood, the National Director for the Canadian Association for Young Children, and a member of the Provincial Board of the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Nova Scotia. Dr. McLean's expertise is in the field of early childhood education, specifically in the areas of play-based learning, reflective practice, in the field of ECE, childcare policy development and evaluation, and pedagogical documentation in early learning settings. That's Christine. And Matthew Sampson is currently a pre-primary lead educator in HRM. Prior to this position, he was an early childhood educator at Peter Green Hall in Halifax for 15 years. And he is the recipient of the 2018 Prime Minister's Award for Excellence in Early Childhood Education. Matthew is currently completing his master's degree in child and youth study at St. Lucie University. He's supervised by Christine. A proponent of emerging curriculum and Reggio Emilia approach to early childhood education, Matthew recognizes the uniqueness of each child in his care. He respects children as capable individuals and supports and encourages them in every regard so they feel valued and secure. So please join me in welcoming Christine and Matthew.
Yeah. All right. Hearing my own voice over speakers, apparently. So my name is Matthew. I'm going to get into the storytelling right away. Hi. So I started at Peter Green Hall about 15 years ago, and when I started there, I was blessed to work with two amazing mentors, Annette Camo and Bobby Lynn Keating. I didn't know much about childcare. I was not yet trained. I had what was called equivalency at the time, which just meant I had a couple years experience and human growth and development course, and a couple of workshops. So walking in, I didn't really know what to expect. They taught me everything I knew about emergent curriculum. I'm assuming that the room knows what emergent curriculum is. I got into it right away with play-based learning, playing with children, documenting their experience and such. And it was very easy because everybody in the room had already bought into it. So I didn't have any struggles at all. An opportunity came up about 2 years later to move into a separate classroom, a school-age room, but I had to move into the room without a mentor teacher. I had to go in and be the mentor or be the lead in the room. And I was like, yeah, of course I got this. I know exactly what I'm doing. So I went into the school-age classroom and started practicing what I had done in the senior preschool classroom, and it was going amazing, and everything was wonderful until parents started to have complaints, until my director started to have complaints. They had complained about how messy the classroom was. They had complained that maybe some of the children were swearing in the classroom. They had complained about some of the artwork had contained scenes of violence or drugs. And I was like, oh no, I'm not a perfect teacher. I've done it wrong. I've messed it up. I don't know what I'm doing. So my reaction was to fix those problems. Focus on cleaning up the classroom. Focus on monitoring the children's discussions. And in particular, something that happened was a child drew a picture that depicted a drug deal. So on one page was a stick figure. Sorry, do you know the story? Oh. I thought you just said what I was thinking.
No.
Anyway, so a stick figure of a person holding a money bag, and then another bag, and then a whole bunch of other stuff. On the back was a picture with blood in the midsection, and the other guy running away. So, me trying to make sure that I did the right thing, be the perfect teacher, I said, what is this? What is this drug art? And, well, maybe I didn't say drug art. What is this art? And the child looked at me like, wide-eyed, a little bit frightened, of course. And I said to him, if you're not going to talk about it, you're not allowed to draw it in my classroom. Which was very much the wrong thing to say. I was attempting to develop a relationship of trust with this child and the other children in the room, and what I did at that moment was betray his trust. He had expressed something that he had observed or had been part of his experience, and I basically attacked him as the adult in the room, which was obviously very negative. After reflecting on that, the way I felt after that moment, the way our relationship went after that moment, I realized that putting it on the children to be perfect in my classroom was inappropriate. And it was through that reflection that I decided I would no longer cater to parents, my director, or other people. I would explain to them, I would discuss with them, but I would not cater to them. I did not need their approval to be a perfect teacher, nor should I try to be a perfect teacher. I should try to develop the relationship. So a couple years later, same child as the drug art, had a homework assignment from school, and he and his friend were complaining, oh my God, I have to do a news broadcast. This is such a boring assignment. Our teacher is the worst. And I said, oh, tell me about the assignment. They're like, we can do a news broadcast for 2 minutes. I'm like, about what? And they're like, anything. I'm like, anything? Awesome. You could do like hurricane in Hawaii news or like something else, monsters, whatever. And they're like, oh yeah, that would be so exciting. So I kind of linked into the play of it rather than kind of the assignment of it, and just let them go with it. They brought it back to the classroom, to our classroom, and started drawing characters for their homework assignment. They started to make scenes and draw kind of like an outline of the place, the setting, I guess. And as they did it, they each drew a separate section and taped it together. And I was very excited by this because I had never seen two older children collaborate on art in this way. They had each drawn their own art and then taped it together. So I thought it was interesting, something worth documenting. So then the next day, a couple more children came over. They were interested in what they were doing, and they started to tape some of their stuff onto the picture as well. So I took a closer look, and I'm like, oh, you've got like a thing going on. I had no idea what they were doing at all. But I knew that one of the characters' name was Zombaby, which is zombie baby mixed together. And he was wearing a Hawaiian skirt. So I was like, oh, it must be the homework assignment about Hawaiian news or whatever. Great. So then they kept adding more and more pages as the days went on, and it got too big for the table. So I shoved another table up against it just to make more space for it. And as I shoved the extra table and made the extra space, of course, more children came over and joined. So it had gone from 2 to about 6 to about 10, mostly boys, drawing in pencil this place for zombies. And they were furiously working day after day, week after week. The homework assignment was gone. It had been finished, but they were still working furiously, adding to the zombie ship. And then it got too big for any table, so we turned down some desks, not desks, shelves, flat, and it became sort of like a stage, and they set it down on that. And as they set it down, of course there was more space, so they worked even faster for some reason. A couple weeks passed, it was too big for the floor, we had to stick it up to the wall, and then it just moved like wildfire around the room. Every child kept adding things every single day. And not just adding to the shape of it, but also adding to the complexity of it. So they were adding little characters in the different rooms, creating storylines for their characters. They had a chef whose name was George and made pizza, and he always said extra sauce and extra cheese. One of the rooms was discarded by one of the 2 original boys, and he gave it to his sister, whose name was Emily, and she decided it would be Queen Emily, and she was going to make it pink. Up to this point, it was only pencil, and when she added pink, it just changed everybody's thoughts, because At first it was just pencil drawings, now it's color as well. So yeah, so it just, her 5-year-old versus these 8-year-old boys, she changed the entire art experience, the play experience, really. And then it got to the point where parents had started to complain. They came to me and they said, this is violence, this is war. And my director came to me and said, do you really need to have all that up there? What about the fire marshal? What about other things on the wall? And I said, well, this is the after-schoolers room. This is what's important to them, and this is what we're going to be doing. So I was bolstered by my feelings of disgust with myself previously, that I was not going to back down. I was going to allow the work to continue and continue without censorship. So that's kind of the background. Now, I mean, it went on to be featured in a NASCAD art gallery, and then to Megan Leslie's art gallery that's was in her office. It got some news press. It was pretty fancy. They had created little characters out of clay to sell, but then they didn't want to sell them, so they just played with them, of course. They made zombie birthday cakes. It went into the other room. They had zombie hockey players, and it was just the zombie world. Everything was like the zombie world brand, like Spider-Man brand, zombie world. Everything that they did, it was their excuse to draw. It was their number one, I don't know, request for any type of iconography. Anyway, so yeah, so looking back at this, I trust the children's work. I trust my work with the children. So when parents come to me and they say, but what are they learning? Where are the letters? Where are the numbers? I say, well, if you look over here at my zombie world, could you plan for this? Could you set this up? Could you ask children to do this? Look closer, and they've got flaps where there's different art on the back than the front. So the front, when it lays down, is a daytime scene, and when you flip it up, it's a nighttime scene of the same kind of picture. Or they've got trucks that open up, and inside are what's inside the truck. So it's like this interactive plaything. And there's no way that I could have planned for that. You know, there's no way that I could have set up this. It can only come from play. It can only come from a playful spirit, this sort of depth. And now when parents ask me, you know, about what are they learning, I just have examples from my work history about, you know, children discussing the difference between lava and magma at the lunch table while playing, you know, because that's what children do when they are listened to, when they're allowed to talk about what they want to talk about. So yeah, so that's how, I don't know if that's play persuasion so much, but it's maybe how I explain it to the parents. I just tell them my story. I'm very confident with it because of my experience, and they buy in because they see the results in the children's documentation, in their portfolios. Yeah, so I think that's pretty much it. It's kind of quick.
Excellent. Thank you, Matthew. And I think I might be a bit of a disappointment after that. I think we could probably listen to a few more stories, because I know you have more stories about play that is sometimes like you said, developing that sense of trust with the children, trust in yourself, and then going from there, right? In terms of when we really, our image of the child, when we think of what the child is capable, then we need to trust that they're capable, and then it turns into something as amazing as Zombie World. So hi everybody, it's Christine, and hello Cumberland people. Hopefully you're able to still hear us. Yeah, getting the thumbs up. And happy National Child Day. I don't have my blue ribbon on. You gotta have your blue ribbon on. Excellent, good, and you do as well. Who else has blue ribbons on? We have 2 people anyway. So today marks the 30th anniversary of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it's the 30th National Child Day. So it really is wonderful to be able to present on this special day. So I have that up on the slide. Hard to read that, but it's the play Persuasion. So you'll see that I have an acronym here. Some of you might know this acronym already, PLAY. I made it up. I put a copyright symbol by it, which means that if you use it, you owe me $1. And we have your names, so we can follow up on you get that $1 every time you use it. But my reason for doing this was that we know how important play is. Right? We feel it in our bones and we do it and we understand it, but we're not always great at articulating it, right? We're not always great at being able to have a 30-second elevator speech to say how important play is. And so we do have, as Matthew said, parents who might be coming to us and say, you know, this play is good when they're little, but it's getting close to school or pre-primary. We'd like for you to start working on ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, right? But so we need to be able to articulate as early childhood educators how important play is, what the children are learning while they're doing it. And once parents understand that, once they know the magic of play, they can't unknow that. They don't unlearn it, right? They know it, and it's a, you know, it's an easy. It can be an easy argument once you have the documentation, like Matthew was saying. Once the parents can actually see all the literacy and numeracy and creativity and problem solving and collaboration that happens. And like you said, you wouldn't have been able to plan that. You wouldn't say, okay, children, we're doing a zombie world theme now, and I expect you to cover the entire wall. You have 3 weeks. Go, right? So this is what happens when we allow children to play. So I put that picture in here because that's an actual picture of where I played as a child. I grew up in a small little community in Cape Breton, and that was the pathway to the river that I would go swimming in unsupervised for long periods of time. It was a different time back then, those many decades ago. And it's funny, how many people here grew up in a small community? I can see, okay, a lot of people, and I'm sure Cumberland has a few hands up as well too. And you know, when you're growing up in a small community, it's like you can hardly wait to get out of it, right? Like, I just want sidewalks and pizza. That's all I want, to be able to order for pizza and walk on a sidewalk. But we were so lucky, those of us who had this type of childhood, that you could play freely and you know, and be bored. And because bored leads to creativity, right? Not always the good kind, but there's always, you know, you're using your mind and you're trusting that yourself, you know, that you're going to come up with ideas to play. And we might have some time at the end to kind of, you can share your play experiences as well too. But children now, and I'm reluctant to sound like, you know, in my day we could, and children today, they don't have that same experience, but they don't have that same experience, right? There's a whole lot of issues around children's childhood, and we'll look at some of those. That means that maybe the only times they get to play is when they're in early learning environments, right? Or in childcare settings. So it's so important that early childhood educators not only understand and can articulate the play, but they can facilitate play as well too, because you're the ones that are creating memories for the children who will be talking about this in 20 years' time. Those zombie world kids are going to be talking about zombie world. They'll remember that, right? They'll remember that as adults and so on. And so these are the types of memories that we want to be creating. So there it is, the cardboard box, right? The universal open-ended play material that we see children playing in when you were kids, when I was a kid, and still today, right? Cardboard boxes. Now, of course, today it might need to be a little more tricked out than, not really, that's just a joke. You don't need to do that, but I thought that was a funny picture. And this is a great quote about a cardboard box, written by John Medina, who's the author of the book Brain Rules for Baby, which has been around for a long time, who says, the greatest pediatric brain boosting technology in the world is probably a plain cardboard box, a fresh box of crayons in 2 hours. And the worst is probably the new flat screen TV that came in the box, right? And that's one of the issues, of course, that we have now, is the amount of screen time that children is getting into, which in and of itself can be concerning. But the fact that the amount of screen time takes away from playtime. right? So anyway, that's another whole show. We can do that show another time. This was my screen growing up. Anybody have that as a screen? Yeah. And no matter how hard you Googled, there would be nothing come up. I mean, really, can you imagine explaining to your grandparents or your great-grandparents Google? Like, can you imagine just explaining that there's this thing, or now it's Alexa, right? Or okay Google, like, boggles the mind. But anyway, so there's been a lot of changes over the last little while. But we have to look at what's happening with children now. Now, again, that's a posed picture. That's people are not putting newborns in front of iPads. But let me show you some pictures that aren't posed, that are real. That is a baby seat that comes with a tablet holder that you can buy. Oh my God, that's right, on the internet. Can you imagine? It's something. Now, parents buy it with the best of intentions, right? Thinking that, we're going to start her off with educational programs right from the beginning. But when you think of what's happening here, right, that this little one is turning into a passive rather than an active learner from a very early age, not getting out of the seat and on her belly and having some floor time, to play around, and not getting that eye to eye, that whole turn-taking, communication, reciprocal skills, and so on. So this is a real thing, and this is a real thing. That's a tablet holder for a stroller. So, it's just like, a lot of people here are kind of shaking their heads because it is dismaying, right? But this is a reality, and this is a real thing. The iPotty. Can you imagine? Now, I've shown that picture to some people who go, oh, but that's a good idea. But, imagine that this is where we're heading, right? And these aren't brand new devices. These are devices that have been around for a while. But when, but this is children's reality now. And so remember the movie Wall-E? Does anybody watch that movie? So this is a still from that movie. It's not that much of an exaggeration now, is it? Right? When you think about what the screens and all the screen time is doing to children. And then let's think about what else children are doing in their lives. When they have a little bit of free time, well, then they're in some kind of organized, let's go to skating lessons, or in front of the screen, or at home playing on with a Game Boy or a Nintendo Switch, or being driven around. This was my daughter for the first 2 years of her life. I think was strapped into a car seat, just like, we gotta go, we gotta do things. So not a lot of playtime there either. Or maybe throw in some music lessons, let's play some organized soccer, going home and being in front of the screen. Or if there is a little bit of time, let's send them to kindergarten boot camp, right, where they can learn their letters so in advance of school. So this isn't to say that organized sports and lessons are a bad thing. They're good in moderation, of course. But this is the reality of children. And I know that some children in your programs that probably have something just about every day after school, right? Or every day in the evenings, or 3 or 4 times a week. And so the question becomes, when do children have time to play, right? When do they get to be in charge? Because if it's a true playtime, they're the ones that are writing the script and making up the rules and so on. And why does it matter? So let's have a look at this slide here. This is sensitive periods in early brain development. Some of you may have seen this slide already. So this gray area is the first 4.5 years of a child's life. And then on this side is the sensitivity, high sensitivity or low sensitivity. So let's have a little look. That's vision, hearing, habitual ways of responding, emotional control, language, symbolic thinking, peer social skills, numbers. So what does that tell you about the first 4.5 years of a child's life, right? The first 2,000 days of a child's life, that it's a very sensitive period in terms of their brain development. And so when we're talking about the basis of numeracy, the basis of literacy, emotional control, the habitual ways of responding is kind of your disposition to learning, you know, are you somebody who jumps right in or somebody who holds back or so on. This is all happening during the first 4.5 years of life. Now, this can be a scary slide to show to parents who are like, okay, my kid is screwed. I have, you know, it can be very stressful when you think that, oh my gosh, I need to get them in kindergarten boot camp, and I need to get those language lessons and violin lessons. So it's really important when we show this type of slide that we say in the same breath, but children learn through play. Right? That children learn these things through play. That this is not supposed to be a fear-mongering slide. This is to show you how important those early years are and how important play is as the vehicle through which children learn. So sometimes I think people may interpret that important new brain research into meaning that we need to emphasize academics. You know, when you see things like numeracy and symbolic thinking and so on, that people may misinterpret it as meaning that we need to emphasize academics at an earlier and earlier age, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. And also there's pressure on parents from the media and consumer products to build a better baby, right? There's all these kind of educational toys, and you know, you can get flashcards for toddlers and infants and so on. And so people think, well, if they're selling it, it must be something, right? It must be something. Or if they, you know, they're sometimes they see their friends are using these types of you know, isolating pre-academic skills through flashcards and so on, and they're thinking, oh, I should probably do something. As they're looking at little Johnny, their own little kid over in the corner picking his nose, and then this child hit those 3 languages. You know, you're like, oh, I should probably do something. But you know, again, the message is for parents to relax, play. Where's the play time, right? And to talk about the importance of that play. So we're going to get back to that acronym that I showed you at the beginning soon. So also, sometimes there's downward pressure from schools and teachers to make sure that children come to school prepared. Would you say that's a true statement? Have you experienced that or seen it? Or, you know, that it'd be really helpful if by the time they get to school, they can do this, this, and this. And we know that the only requirement for children to be able to enter school is what? What do they need? They're shots now, yeah. They need to be 5, right? Or, you know, almost 5. That is the only requirement to go to school. You don't need anything else besides shots. Now, so, you know, so we have to make sure that that message is being, you know, that we're very confident in telling parents that, but that we're also in the same breath telling them that, you know, that in a play-based program, there's so much learning going on that it's, you know, you will be amazed. Oh, now I didn't know whether she was this slide or not. I had alternate slides. So this one has a bad word in it. So let me just go to the next slide that doesn't have the bad word. Oops. Okay. So here's the evidence-based truth about exposing children to academic subjects at an earlier and earlier age. It doesn't close that achievement gap that people are worried about, that, you know, if their child comes to school and is not performing as well as little Tiffany, who knows how to count to 300 and knows all her ABCs, that people are worried that that gap gets bigger, right, as the child goes through school. But in fact, we know that exposing children to earlier academics can have a negative effect on children's creativity and desire to learn. So there's a great compilation of research articles on play that's called Crisis in the Kindergarten. And it was written, the authors are Miller and Allman. And so I'm just going to tell you about a couple of studies that they included in that report. So they said a study of 120 children found that 4-year-olds in an academic stream did know the alphabet better a year later than those who were in a more play-based program. So granted, academic program, kids know the alphabet better, play-based program, they didn't know it yet. By the time they started grade 1, it was hard to tell. Like when I look out at all your wonderful faces and when I sense the vibe from Cumberland, I don't know which one of you knew your ABCs first, right? I don't know which one of you can count to 100 first. But when you get to know people, you know which ones can collaborate and cooperate and be creative and have initiative and problem solving. So this was the key difference between these two programs. The ones that started formal learning earlier were less creative and less keen on learning than the play-based group. So even though they knew their ABCs first, at what cost, right? And then there was another wave of educational reform in the 1970s in Germany, which is, of course, the originator of kindergarten, because we know kindergarten is a German word for children's garden. And even though we don't use the word kindergarten in Nova Scotia, it's everywhere else for that first year of school. So there was a wave of educational reform in the 70s that changed the emphasis to teaching phonetics and other discrete skills from the play-based programs that kindergartens always were prior to that. Then they compared 50 play-based classes with 50 what they called cognitive achievement programs, and they found by age 10 the children who had played, the children who were in the play-based programs, excelled over the others in many ways. They were more advanced in reading and writing, they were better adjusted socially and emotionally in school, they excelled in creativity, intelligence, oral expression, and problem solving. So as a result of the study, Germany went back to play-based kindergartens again after seeing that. So we do know that there's research that, it's not just a gut feeling that we have, but there's research that supports this. So in fact, we know the children who are most successful in the first few years of school are those who are able to self-regulate, right? And self-regulation, of course, means being able to control my emotions, my behavior, and my thinking. And children learn to self-regulate when they play, right? When they have the opportunity to learn through play, when they're allowed to make choices, and when their imagination is encouraged. And that's information that Stuart Shanker has done, is a Canadian researcher who's done a lot of work in self-regulation, and I have his website up here for you as well in just a couple of slides. So most importantly, the child learns to self-regulate when playing with their friends, right? So you know that in order to, when we're talking about self-regulating, it's being able to recognize, if you're too amped up and then how to bring yourself back down again to a state of calm alertness where you're able to learn. And you figure that out real quick when you're with your friends, right? Because if you're not able to regulate your own emotions, kids don't want to play with you. Right, and so you see friends modeling this as well, and so that's the best teacher when it comes to being able to self-regulate. Now, certainly there are children who are going to need extra assistance in doing that, and there's all kinds of ways. We're talking more and more about mindfulness and meditation with young children and in schools and so on. So there's certainly ways to help, but this is one of the things that we know, that children learn to self-regulate when playing with their friends. So this is the self-regulation website. It's a really good one. It has all kinds of resources on it, videos and so on. So www.self-regulation.ca, and it's a Canadian site. So, another one that you can have a look at and see what resources you find helpful when you're persuading people about the importance of play. So high quality early learning environments need to not only talk the talk, you need to walk the walk, right? So not only do you need to be able to describe the importance of play, you need to be able to show the value of play. So let's take a closer look at play. So just to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So play is voluntary. That's one of the most important characteristics of play, that you're doing it because you want to, not because you have to. If you're doing an activity because you have to, it's not play. And the wonderful thing about it being voluntary is that you can leave it at any time. And so the other children know that, right? And they know that if I don't negotiate and compromise a little bit, I'm not going to have anybody to be the dog in the dramatic play area, right? That I have to do some quick talking to make sure that you're the mom and you're the dad and I'm the queen and he's the dog and so on. But if you're always the queen, then nobody wants to play with you anymore, right? So you're learning, because they can leave and go somewhere else. It's voluntary. It's intrinsically motivated. If you have to give somebody a sticker to do it, then it's not play, right? If you need to reward somebody to do it, it's not play. It's self-directed. So the example that Matthew gave, that was totally self-directed, right? By those children. that you weren't telling them, okay, now we're going to do flaps where it's a measured day and so on. It was self-directed and it was controlled by the players and concerned with the process over the product. So it was so great to hear Matthew's story initially because it really shows that those were all the characteristics of what the children were doing while they were creating zombie world. So this whole control or concern with process over product, that's it's easy enough to say, but what does that mean? So it means that children are more interested in doing something than in making something, okay? And again, you're thinking, okay, well, what does that mean? I'll show you the opposite of process. This is product. Can you read it? That one owl is seeing some things. Can you tell which owl it is? He's seeing some things. This little guy right here. So this is the type of product, activities and product art that is not play. This was not intrinsically motivated. It might not have even been voluntary, right? It certainly wasn't directed by the child. When you see identical art like that, product focused art, then that is not a play-based activity and may not be a totally play-based environment, right? This is almost a signal that the person who did this activity doesn't quite understand about play-based learning, right? And I know that we've all done this when we were kids, and the temptation is there. We had Halloween. There was probably paper plate pumpkins and 2-year-olds coloring poppies for World War II. Like, it's hard to have a good discussion with a 2-year-old about World War II. But but when we're putting an emphasis on that end product, then that is taking away from the children's play. Right? That is not falling in the characteristics. So it's very hard to persuade a parent who is expecting this, and so you're providing it, that you're also doing a play-based program, right? Because it's the antithesis of play. So when I see people that, that say, well, I do it because the parents like to, they like to have something to put on their fridge. So that gets back to, and Matthew, you alluded to it as well too, but I'll call it having a backbone about your early childhood expertise, right? That you wouldn't, if a parent came and said to you, when Johnny does something wrong, we smack him. And I'm wondering if you could, just for continuity's sake, do that in your program as well too, because we'd like to have consistency between home and school. Are you okay with that? Like, you're not going to say, oh yes, okay, we'll smack Johnny. We're not going to smack the other kids, but we'll smack Johnny. You're not going to do that. But if parents say, oh, this is a real cute idea I saw on Pinterest, and I think that the kids would really enjoy doing it, you need to have that backbone of early childhood education to say, you know what, that's something that focuses on a product. But what you'll see the children doing in this room is that we're all about individual creation and about the process. And if you want to even have a more tangible example of what process means, how many of you, when you were little, and maybe even still now, spread white glue all over your hands and let it dry and peel it off? Anybody do that? Yeah. Okay, so a lot of people do that. I bet you can't remember what you were making at the time, right? You can't read. It might have been a paper plate pumpkin. It might have been. We all were exposed to that horrible practice as children, I know. But the process of just watching the glue dry, watching it crack, peeling it off, that's what children are interested in when they're doing art, right? And now as they get older, they start getting interested in the end product, but it's their end product, right? It's one that they decided that they wanted. They might want to know more about technique. If they're doing watercolor or so on, they may want to know about how do you wet the brush and do the, so we can facilitate their creations through, helping them with technique. But when we do something like that, then there's all kinds of messages being sent to children, right? That there's one right way to do it. You do it the way the teacher tells you. There's no room for creativity. Well, except for this guy here. And so those aren't the messages that we want to send to children. Right? So even though this is it seems like a pretty innocuous thing, but it's a symptom of a larger problem. right? It's a symptom of lack of understanding about play. And also, sometimes play is seen as something that is messing around, right? That we do it when our work is finished, then we can play. And I hear that I've worked with kindergarten, grade 1 teachers, grade 2 teachers. They'll say, oh yeah, we're all about play. We let the kids play at the last 15 minutes of the day when their work is done, right? So that is, but when we see it as just kind of a release for the children, then it's hard for us to describe its importance in helping children learn. So we need to know why play is important and how play helps to promote learning. So let's hear from some VWs on the topic of play. And I see there's some former students in my class who are here that may know what VWs are. Anybody know? Bigwigs. So these are the bigwigs. These are the academic giants. But just to hear from some of them in terms of the importance of play. So the American Academy of Pediatrics in January 2007, which was a long time ago now. But anyway, they dedicated the entire month of January issue of their journal to play. So this is a quote that came from the preface of it. That play is essential to development. Play allows children to use their creativity while developing their imagination, dexterity, and physical, cognitive, and emotional strength. So that's Kenneth Ginsburg that said that. David Elkind, who's a real guru in the field of early childhood education, says that curiosity, imagination, and creativity are like muscles. If you don't use them, you lose them. This guy, this guy, we don't often think of him as an early childhood educator, but I love the quote because I think it really describes what we do as early childhood educators. I never teach my pupils. I only attempt to provide them with the conditions in which they learn. Isn't that great? And that's what our role is, right? To create the conditions in which children learn, to figure out that children learn even if they're not being taught, right? We don't have to teach them in order for them to learn. Stuart Brown, who if you haven't seen his TED Talk on play, then make sure you write it down and watch that TED Talk. It's long. How many people here watch TED Talks? If you don't watch TED Talks, you gotta watch TED Talks. That'll be 6 hours, you'll never get back again once you go in that spiral. But Stuart Brown did an excellent TED Talk on play. He started out working with, he was like interested in crime and criminals and serial killers and so on. And when he was talking with serial killers, one of the things that he found was that they didn't play as children. I know, it's creepy. But now that doesn't mean that we're, if we make paper plate pumpkins, that the children automatically are going to be serial killers. Like we don't want to make that, cause and effect there. But it was a fascinating talk. And so he says that play is like fertilizer for the brain. It's crazy not to use it. And then this book, or this paper that I was talking about, Miller and Allman, say that when children are not given the opportunity to play, it makes us label misbehavior in normal learning patterns as disabilities, right? As learning disabilities, because children want to play and they will find ways to be creative and to play. And if they're not given the opportunity to do that, then often it ends up with them getting in trouble. So why is play important? Because it promotes social competence, confidence, that sense of I can do this, that sense of agency, abstract thinking, conversational skills, turn-taking, problem-solving, mathematical reasoning, scientific reasoning, and a love of learning. And so these are the things that we should be able to be prepared to talk with other people about, right? This is what play promotes. It helps to develop the whole child, all the domains. And so let's just look a little more closely. So we know that active and interesting play on a regular basis promotes brain development in young children, and we're able to do research now with little caps that go on children when they're playing, and they can see the areas of the brain that are firing and so on. Language and literacy happens in play when children are in play-based, print-rich environments. When they're talking, we have to remember that literacy is not just written, it's oral, right? So it's talking and listening, and it's reading and writing. And but it's in situations where reading and writing is seen as being meaningful and having a purpose, right? And I know you all have stories about times when children were really motivated to write something, to write a sign, or to write, their friends' names down and things like that, because it's through play, it's their idea, they're motivated, it's meaningful, it's what they need to know at that time. We know that writing and reading during play shows children the purpose for reading and writing, which is much more effective than rote learning, right? Than just practicing worksheets with A's, B's, and C's. Numeracy, we know that children start to understand various math concepts the more they are able to handle play materials, especially open-ended materials, blocks, especially love blocks. Every early learning program should have a big block area. That's another whole show that we'll do another time. This is a great picture from a book called Beautiful Stuff, and some of you might know about that book. And this is, what's she playing with? Can you tell? Marker tops. How many in this room, how many marker tops have we thrown away in our lives, right? And then you add Cumberland to that too. Well, forget it. They probably throw even more marker tops away than you do. But so this is somebody who is collecting marker tops, and this child is doing what children do naturally, and that's to classify. And she's actually, she's picked out all the brown marker tops, and now she's doing seriation, where she's moving the darkest to the lightest, right? This is intrinsically motivated. She's naturally doing that. That's probably like grade 2 math that she's doing, right? This is a picture I took at a center in the West Coast of Newfoundland, and it's something that children just naturally do when they have play materials, right? From smallest to biggest. And this is another picture from Beautiful Stuff, where these girls have just a bunch of beautiful stuff, or junk, as we might call it. And what I want you to notice is right here, these are the great big red elastics, and this child is using the red elastics to denote a set of something, right? She's put all the circle shapes in one, and it looks like she's about to maybe do the same thing with this other one. That's math. And you probably even remember in your math workbooks having to circle the set of nickels, right? And that type of thing. So this is what she's doing. In terms of their social competence, we know that children become socially competent when they're involved in dramatic and pretend play, when they are involved in social interactions in small group settings, so they're learning trust, empathy, and social skills. And we know that, and I won't read off all of this for the slide, but children who engage in complex sociodramatic play have all of these benefits. And in order to have complex sociodramatic play, you need to have the time and the opportunity and the space to do it, right? So large blocks of free play time that allow for children to have all of these wonderful benefits from sociodramatic play. And we also know that when you have good social skills and empathy, that's a key predictor to academic achievement. So again, for parents who are concerned about academic achievement, we know that children who are good at getting along with others do better in school. And you know why? Because they're not going around with a knot in their stomach all the time because they don't have any friends, or that they don't know how to interplay situations, or that they're afraid of recess, that they're worried, that they're either a bully or they're bullied. Because they, so when we have good social skills and empathy, then our brains can learn. We can relax in class and we can learn. And also physical well-being, of course, is promoted through play. And I think that spiritual development, I'm not talking from a religious point of view, but I'm talking about just recognizing that we have a spirit and a connection to something that's bigger than us, whether it's the world or whether it's nature, whether it's animals, whether it's objects. And I love this picture. It's a little girl. It's a daughter of a fellow that I used to work with. And he knew that I was collecting pictures of children, so he brought that one in. And I don't know if you can tell what she's doing, but she is just enamored with herself, her shadow, because it looks like the shadow of a princess, right? Because she's wearing her princess dress. So she was so enamored with her shadow that she said to her dad, I want to draw my shadow. And so that's what she's doing right there. She has a sketch pad and a pencil in her hand, and she's trying to draw the outlines of her shadow, which is a very complex thing to try to do, right? But it's, it's something, it's self-motivated, and she's playing. So this is the crux of it all. I'm wondering if we need a new word for play, because play, when we say, oh yeah, let the kids play at the end of the day or whatever, parents are like, is that all you do is play? Or even some of your friends or people that you're talking to, when you talk about what you do and you go, must be nice, you get to play all day, right? That's not a very hard job. So sometimes I think the word play has been trivialized, that we need to kind of give it some more import. So this is what I propose, that we, P-L-A-Y. Oh my gosh, my stuff is all bad. Okay, so let's go right to the next one. P in play stands for problem-based learning. So this is your elevator speech, okay? This is your 30-second speech for explaining to people why play is important. So you can say play is actually problem-based learning. So whenever you watch children play, they are always seeking to solve some sort of problem. It's how do I make that block structure stand and stay standing? How do I get little Johnny to be the dog again and let me be the queen? There's always problems that children are solving. And when you go to work tomorrow, I want you to watch for that and see, okay, what problem are they trying to solve? We know that problem solving is one of the most effective ways to learn. We know that post-secondary education, they talk about experiential learning. That's the same thing, problem solving, problem-based learning. So P is for problem-based learning. L is for language rich. So as we discussed before, because sometimes I think people think I'm an anti-alphabetite, because I'm always saying about throw away those ABC worksheets, right? But I'm not anti-literate. And we do have a system, an alphabetic system that we must use. So I'm not against the alphabet. I'm against teaching it in discrete little non-meaningful ways to children. But when you are in a play-based environment, you're going to have children reading and writing and storytelling and debating and discussing and questioning and predicting, recording. So it's a place where literacy skills are learned, but not necessarily taught, right? So here's an example. We've all seen this, right? The signs that's a Walmart right there that children want to make for their block structures and so on. So they're motivated, right? They're motivated to write. A is for active environment. So P, problem-based, L, language-rich, A, active environment. So we know that children have to have hands-on, rough and tumble, messy, invigorating, focused, challenging play in an environment that allows them to be both active and interactive in a variety of ways. So active as opposed to passive. Think about it in that way, right? All of those tablet holders for baby seats and strollers are creating passive learners, where we want to have children who are active and their face and eyes into it. So here's a quote that says, it is hypothesized that the early education experience may change children from passive to active learners who begin to take initiative in seeking information, help, and interaction with others. When this increased motivation to learn is met by a positive response, then long-term gains on outcome measures can result. So when children know to come to you to ask questions, they know where in the room to get the stuff that they need, when they have access, when they have time, when they have space, when they have opportunity, then they are active learners. They learn to plan ahead, they learn how to persist with tasks, they learn how to use and experiment with resources, they know how to talk to a peer. If they have questions, they see what the other children in the room can do, and they know who's the expert in knot tying and who's the expert in cutting and who's the expert in building blocks, and so they can use their peers for resources. They know when to come to you as an adult in terms of using you for a resource. They know how to direct themselves. They know how to direct others. Those are all the 21st century skills that are going to, that people are going to need in order to be successful in working. It's not about who's learned their ABCs first, right? It's about who can do these types of things, and you can't do it if you don't have an active environment. If you have an environment that is being adult directed all the time, or that you're not allowed to do things that's restrictive, then you're not learning. So we have problem-based, we have language-rich, we have active environment, and we have for young children. So you might be thinking, oh, Christine, you just needed a Y for your PLAY. And initially, you're right, I did. But when I thought more about it, And the more that I talk to people about play, and there's all kinds of experts out there about it, there's one person who said, why should we even justify why play is important? Why do we feel the need to justify it in terms of what it will help children do in the future? Why can we not just recognize it as a right for young children? And so especially on today, National Child Day, the 30th anniversary of UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, if we recognize play as a right for children, that it's about who they are right now. It's not about who they're going to become, right? I'm going to be a senior citizen in a while. I don't practice walking in a walker yet, right? Just so I'm prepared when and I will eventually need to go walking. Do you want to say something? Yes. Just 1 second. We want Cumberland to hear you.
Right now, society is to make excuses for parents.
Yeah.
I think now it's like, they need to have time to make supper. Yes, give them the tablet, give the children the tablet, and then they'll quiet, you can make supper.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like in my day, there's some kids, they don't sleep, they come at 7 in the morning, and they don't sleep 6 o'clock at
Yes,
night.
yeah, so there can be children that are with you for 10 and 11 hours, right?
So where is time for them to play?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And that's, yeah. Yeah, but so now we have to be careful about, because I know that if there were tablets available when my kids were little, they would have been playing the tablet. I was trying to make supper, I can tell you that right now. I was once writing a workshop on science for young children when my son was 4. He's now 29 and he has recovered from this incident. But I was preparing for a workshop for science for young children. I was writing things like, about how children need to explore materials. So my son has the chair pushed up and he's playing with the dirty dishwater and he's making bubbles with his hands. And he's going, look, Mom. And sweetie, Mommy's busy, go watch TV. Encourage children's questions as they experiment with materials. As I work on my presentation. So the fact is, you made a really good point that children are with us sometimes for 10, 11 hours. So we can do this, right? We have no control. When they leave and there's a tablet put right in front of them as soon as they get in the car, we have no control over that. But what we do have control over is when they're with us. And we don't need to put them in front of screens, right? We want to create these environments where children are playing. And so remember, it's not about what children are becoming, but it's what they're being right now. Let's give that 3-year-old the best 3-year-old year they can have, the 4-year-old the best 4-year-old. They're not pre-5s. I'm not a pre-senior, right? So that is your PLAY. That's it. Yay! These are not my grandchildren, they're somebody else's, but okay, thank you very much. And that's it. So, Jessie Lee, what would we do? Just have a Q&A right now?
So, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We'll give everybody here at the launch. We'll kind of go back and forth a little bit. So we'll do a couple questions here from the map. So if you have any questions for Christine or for Matthew, then just raise your hands and let them know. And then we will switch over to our satellite site to give them an opportunity to ask some questions as well.
Okay, perfect. Question. Oh, actually, Sarah, do you want to run around this for people?
Yes,
to say
absolutely.
Questions into?
Any questions?
Or it doesn't need to be a question. It can be a comment or an experience that you have, or things that
For me, the same as you, like when I came here to Canada, and like in my country, I have the ECE from my country, but here I have the equivalence. And I came here, and when I start and do my own way, the same thing that parents and the director start like getting annoyed from me, because this is not the way you should do it. It's not a word. Like I do it in my way, and then I feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I can't do this work anymore. And then what I decided to do the ECE again here in Canada, to have the experience. And when I start working in daycare more and more, I get the experience. So that's why I get like the same example, but yeah, I really like your example.
Just have a question. We know that children have a hard time learning if they're having a hard time self-regulating. What would you suggest for a child that has behaviors so extreme that they can't self-regulate enough to even play?
Right, okay. Do you want to take this one? So that is, that's difficult. And on the self-regulation side, one of the first things that they would say is to look at your environment, right? Because if there's no place for a child to get away from, like when you think about, like as one of you said, the lady in the back, that they're with us for like 10, 11 hours. Can you imagine being with all of ye, if I put you all in a room and made you spend 11 hours together, right? One of you is going to be sitting rocking in a corner at some point. Or biting or whatever, right? And so we expect an awful lot from children. And so I think one of the first things is to have that environment where you know that they can get away from the other children, but also get to read their cues. And the self-regulation doesn't always come naturally. Some children really need a lot of support in doing that. There's some great books for children, even on self-regulation, about how to recognize when your motor's running too fast and how do you then kind of get control of that. Mindfulness, yoga with children, just getting that calm atmosphere in the room can help those who are having difficulty self-regulating. But at some point, if a child is just really, and a lot of children, okay, another good point. We don't see children coming to us necessarily who know how to play because of the screens, right? And if any of you tried to take an iPad away from a 3-year-old, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Where it's like you're trying to wrench it out of their hands. So all that, the screen time is less time for, interacting with others and knowing how to interplay situations. And sometimes that's one of the main things that children don't know is how to enter a play situation, right? And so you can model that for them, or you can ease that for them by saying, looks like, Carter really wants to come and play in the block area with you. Whereas before, Carter might just have kicked down the block structure to try it because he doesn't know any other way to get into that play situation. So it's a lot of work and a lot of careful looking, but I bet there's probably other people out here that can even speak to that more than I can. Is there anything that anybody has tried in terms of helping children? Okay, and then we'll.
So something that I've been focusing on the last couple of years, just because I haven't had a consistent group. My group switches now that I'm in pre-primary, so every year I get a brand new 20 sort of thing, which is fun. So for the children who aren't self-regulating, can't work with others, I try to find which adult in the room they can stand, and then try to develop a relationship of trust. Once they find one person in the room that they can trust, then they can practice play with that one person. I'm usually that person because I'm all about getting down and playing with the children. Really, like, if they want to be rough, I can be rough. If they want to be messy, I can be messy. Like, whatever they want to do, I'm very confident with that. So I develop a relationship of trust with that child and then play one-on-one with them for a while, if it's possible. And then slowly add another, maybe very experienced player, somebody who's great with explaining self-regulation, join them in. And then once 2 or 3 children are playing with me, with the child, then I start to move myself away. You know what I mean? So certainly we start with the environment, but also relationships of trust, I find really help with self-regulation.
Yeah. We have a child who has a meltdown every time he doesn't get his own way. And we have several children like that. And we will encourage that child, we're here to help you, but first you need to calm your body down so we can talk about it. Take a breath. And initially it's the teacher taking a breath in and the child's just watching, but then the child will start to breathe and their body, you can see their body calm down. And this afternoon, I actually saw this child who was having all the meltdowns, helping one of his classmates to calm her body down by breathing. And you can see his hands, take his breath in. And I was across the room watching it. Breath in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, it's
amazing.
really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Those are the things you cry about at night.
Yeah.
I hugged my coworker. I'm like,
Yeah. Or the first time you see a child who's getting ready to hit, but then they put the hand down and say, I'm really mad.
yeah.
Right? You know, that's like such a breakthrough. You can't even imagine that. Okay. Okay.
If you have a child that is having a hard time self-regulating, I have a couple of those. And I find what will often help is if you have access to visuals and creating choice boards, and if there's like a choice board of 2 objects that you know will calm the child down, and helping them pick one of those objects, and then that might calm them down. And also adding on to what Matthew said with the relationship, if it's the teacher that kid has a relationship with the most, that might be super helpful.
They're all great ideas. They're pretty much what I was going to say. But another thing too is having everybody on the same page. You have every staff member on the same page and have the same type of kind of like rules or like what your expectations. That if one child has the same expectations for each single staff in the classroom and not get away with things with one staff compared to another staff, then you're going to get the consistency, and then that child will be able to trust everybody in the classroom, and then you're going to see those behaviors possibly decrease as well.
Okay, Sarah.
Just ask if there's any.
Okay, any you don't see the PowerPoint?
That was from where?
Oh, okay. Do we have to do it again? Okay, Cumberland, do you want to ask questions or type a question in? Oh, you have to type it in. Okay.
Yep, she's gonna type it or message. So we'll
Right
see
on. Okay.
which way it goes.
Okay, so we'll see. Oh, you're so excited.
Yeah, we could probably do one other question.
Yeah,
while we're
or
waiting.
question or comment or story.
Thank you. I'm not very confident public speaker, but I'll have a go. I worked in Sweden for a while in a forest school.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
that's one of my passions is nature-based learning, obviously based on the children's interests with very free and child initiating. One of the things I would like to mention is that we don't teach in Sweden. We did not teach literacy or math at all. It was very much, they would start making their marks and then their measurements would be because they wanted to make a certain, they have saws and they want to make sort of wood a certain measurement, and that would naturally be initiated by themselves. And once they start school at 7, they already have 7. Yeah. They already have the skills. In fact, what I've taught in quite a few countries, in England, obviously, but in England as well, the children are already prepared because they have that confidence in themselves and that love of learning, and that has been through play-based experiences within nature. So they already feel that there are no expectations from nature. There are no things on the wall saying we need to learn this.
Yes.
There is, it's a tree. They feel a part of it, and that self-confidence that comes from that is something people.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. Okay.
And then you brought up the idea of measurement. And just recently in my classroom, I was working with my new team this year, and the children were arguing over who's taller. And I'm like, oh, yes. Argument over who's taller. Great, love it, love it. She's like, should I get out measuring tapes and measure the children and see who's taller? No, you should not. So I told her to ask the children, how do we know who's taller? Ask a question. Join the play in an authentic way. Make it a game, not necessarily come up with the answer. When you give them the answer, you take away their chance to discover it themselves, to own their own knowledge. Anyway, So just funny that you brought that up. It's just been going up.
And thank you so much. I would love to chat with you more about the forest schools in Sweden. Who wouldn't want to have a conversation about that? But I love the point that you made that when they're in the nature doesn't demand anything of them. And we might be saying to ourselves, well, we don't demand anything of them either. But when they walk in a room and they see ABCs plastered all over the walls and 1, 2, 3s hanging down from the ceiling and colors and shapes and all this kind of stuff, you might not be saying it, but the environment is saying that. Right? And so when I talk with students and early childhood educators a lot about this important real estate right here, these walls, that these walls are where we put things that the children have created and that makes it their space, right? And not the commercially made. I know the wintergreen folks probably have a hit on me or something because I'm always saying, don't buy anything, don't buy any commercially made bulletin board displays, none of that kind of stuff. It's a waste of money and it's sending a wrong message to the children. So I love that when they're outside, we're not going to see these same kind of problems that that might be happening, right?
Just to add to that.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to add to that, I can say 100%, when I did it for a number of years, and even in the UK, the forest schools that we did there, it's going to sound crazy when I say this, but we did not see the behaviours that we see in those.
Yes.
Things like ADHD and all these, even children who are on the spectrum of autism, they are not as magnified and amplified as they are once you put them in 4 walls.
Yes.
And so therefore you can see that their levels of stress lessen, the adult stress lessens, and the whole environment in itself is so much more productive and comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And so just like my analogy of all of us spending 11 hours together, if we spend 11 hours together in this room, it would be one behavior. If we spend 11 hours together on the beach, it would be another whole experience, right? It would be a lot less stressful if we were able to be outside and, walking and hiking and doing the things that, that you can be by yourself or you can be with others. You can go fast, you can go slow, right? Those restrictions aren't there. So thank you so much. Do we have any Cumberland questions?
We don't.
Okay.
So I think we will disconnect from Cumberland now.
Okay.
If you can hear me, Katrina. So we're all going to be doing an activity here at the Mount, and Cumberland will be doing the exact same activity where we have some flip charts with some pre-established questions. On them. And again, Cumberland has the exact same questions. So we're just going to reflect on Christine and Matthew's presentation and storytelling, as well as our own experiences, and just give some key takeaways from the evening, which is really helpful for us in terms of planning future sessions. So we are going to disconnect now, Katrina, just to let you know, and best of luck doing your flip chart activity. So there will be, do you want to disconnect?
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're doing our flip chart activity here, Christine and Matthew will also just kind of mingle around the room. It'll be more opportunity for you to ask some questions if you'd like to.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the paper.
They're coming, yeah.
Yeah. So you can get comfortable.